You believe you know yourself, but you have only seen the surface. Beneath the polite words you speak, beneath the smiles you show, beneath the roles you play, there are caverns you have never dared to enter. Places that whisper your secrets when you are alone. Places that pull at you in dreams. Places that terrify you not because they are unreal, but because they are truer than the life you perform every day. Carl Jung warned us that the psyche is not a calm meadow. It is a vast, dangerous wilderness, filled with hidden valleys and shadowed abysses that can either break you or transform you. And if you wander into them unprepared, they can destroy your mind. The first of these hidden landscapes is the abyss where you bury everything you do not want to admit about yourself. Think of every anger you have swallowed, every envy you have denied, every desire you told yourself was wrong. You didn't destroy them by pushing them down. You fed them, and now they live in the shadow. Jung called it simply the shadow. It is the unseen container of your darkness, and no one escapes it. You have already felt it. When rage erupted out of you for no reason, when jealousy gnawed at your chest, when shame paralyzed you at the worst possible moment. These eruptions are not accidents. They are messages from the abyss. The danger of the shadow is not that it exists. The danger is in pretending it doesn't. Denied, it grows teeth. Repressed, it gains control. The people who terrify you, the monsters you see in others, often mirror the pieces of yourself you have exiled. Jung wrote that everyone carries a shadow, and the less it is embodied in the conscious life, the blacker and denser it becomes. You think you are running from darkness outside, but in truth, you are running from yourself, and every step away only makes the shadow stronger. It is here that many lose their way. Some are swallowed by projection. They begin to see their own denied impulses in everyone around them. They attack others for dishonesty while hiding their own. They despise arrogance but secretly crave power. They condemn selfishness but quietly manipulate for validation. In this way, the shadow plays its cruelest trick. It blinds you to yourself while making you certain about others. Whole societies collapse into this abyss when groups project their shadows onto enemies, scapegoating them instead of confronting their own darkness. Wars are fought, hatreds are justified, all because the shadow was left unexamined. You may wonder, why not simply destroy it? Why not purge the darkness and live only in the light? Jung's answer was blunt, because without the shadow, you are not whole. Every quality you repress, anger, desire, ambition, selfishness, carries energy. If you bury it, you lose that energy. To be fully alive, you must reclaim it. The goal is not to kill the shadow, but to integrate it, to take back what you have denied and give it a place in the house of your soul. Only then can you direct its power instead of being devoured by it. But most people are terrified of this work, and so they hide behind another dangerous landscape of the mind. This is the glittering mask you wear to be accepted, the role you play to be loved, the costume that society applauds while your true self suffocates behind it. Jung called it the persona. On the surface, it seems harmless, even useful. The persona helps you survive in the world. It lets you smile at your boss even when you are angry. It lets you charm strangers at parties. It lets you slip into roles that keep you safe from rejection. But live inside the mask too long, and you forget who you are. The danger of the persona is subtle. It does not destroy you violently like the shadow does. It erodes you quietly. Day after day, you choose acceptance over authenticity. You perform instead of speak. You hide instead of reveal, until one morning you wake up, and though your life looks successful, inside you are empty. Jung warned that too strong an identification with the persona leads to neurosis, because you lose contact with the self. You become only the mask, and when the mask cracks, as it always does, the collapse feels like death. Think of the times you felt like a stranger in your own life, smiling while suffocating, performing while dying inside. Perhaps you've felt that sharp panic when someone sees through your mask and glimpses the real you. That terror of exposure is the persona tightening its grip. You fear that if people knew the truth, they would leave. But here is the paradox. By hiding the truth, you are already alone. By protecting the mask, you abandon the self. Jung believed this was one of the greatest dangers of modern life. Entire societies built on personas, everyone playing roles, no one daring to be authentic. The result is epidemics of emptiness, depression, and anxiety. Not because people lack things, but because they lack themselves. And when the mask finally collapses, the repressed shadow surges out. This is why scandals erupt, why people live double lives, why entire identities implode in midlife crises. The persona can protect you for a while, but eventually the self demands to be seen. So you see, the first two places of danger are already within you. The abyss of the shadow, where denied impulses gather strength. The glittering mask of the persona, where the self suffocates in silence. To face them is terrifying. To ignore them is fatal. Jung insisted that the path to wholeness begins here, in the confrontation with what you fear most in yourself, and in the unmasking of the lies you tell to survive. And if you have felt the pull of these truths, if you recognize yourself in these words, do not turn away. Because this journey is not about despair, it is about awakening. Subscribe now, not as a casual act, but as a vow to yourself. A vow that you will not keep living as a mask, that you will not keep running from the abyss. Stay, because what comes next will demand courage, but it will also give you strength, because there are more places ahead, deeper corridors, more dangerous landscapes. Jung warned of labyrinths where old wounds entangle you, of oceans where you drown in collective myths, of peaks where power corrupts, of mirrors that twist your love, of abysses that threaten even the strongest. You have stepped into the first two. In the next part, we will descend further, into the labyrinth of your complexes and the ocean of the collective unconscious, where the danger is not just losing yourself, but losing your mind to forces older than you. You have touched the shadow, you have seen the mask, and now you are ready to go deeper. You may believe the greatest dangers of the psyche are the shadows you repress or the masks you wear. But Jung knew there are deeper mazes within you, labyrinths built not of stone but of memory, emotion and wound. Imagine corridors twisting endlessly, doors opening into rooms you have visited before, yet each time they feel slightly different. This is the world of complexes. They are not just thoughts. They are living knots of energy within the unconscious, born from experiences so charged with pain or desire that they form their own gravitational fields. Think of the child who grew up feeling invisible. Each rejection, each dismissal, each moment of neglect coalesces into a wound. That wound becomes a complex, an autonomous entity within the psyche. Years later, a friend forgets to return a call, and suddenly rage erupts, not because of the small slight in the present, but because the labyrinth has been triggered. The forgotten child has awakened. This is the danger. Complexes distort perception. They drag you back into old battles. They bind you to ancient fears. They trap you in cycles that make no sense to your conscious mind. Jung described them as splinter psyches, fragments of the self that behave as if they were independent beings. When a complex is triggered, you are no longer entirely yourself. You are possessed. You may say things you do not mean, believe things you later regret, act in ways you cannot explain. And afterward you feel the exhaustion, the confusion, the shame, as if you had been led through a labyrinth and only now emerged, unsure how you got lost in the first place. The real danger is not just in being trapped once, but in living there permanently. Some wander the labyrinth their entire lives, circling the same unresolved pain. The abandoned child grows into an adult who sabotages every relationship. The humiliated teenager becomes the adult who attacks others before they can be attacked. The one betrayed by love becomes the cynic who no longer trusts anyone. The complex becomes identity. And when identity fuses with wound, the labyrinth consumes the soul. You have felt this too. The sudden intensity of emotion that seems out of proportion to the moment, the arguments that repeat themselves with uncanny familiarity, the despair that feels ancient, as if it does not belong to today. That is the labyrinth whispering, pulling you deeper, and unless you confront it, you remain a prisoner of ghosts. Jung believed that confronting complexes requires brutal honesty, a willingness to face the story behind the wound. Only then can the labyrinth lose its hold. But until then, it remains one of the most dangerous places in the mind. Yet beyond the labyrinth, there lies something even more vast, something that dwarfs your personal wounds. Jung called it the collective unconscious. Imagine not a maze, but an ocean, dark, endless, and alive. Beneath the surface of your individual mind lies a depth that is not yours alone. It belongs to all of humanity. Archetypes, the mother, the hero, the trickster, the wise old man, swim in its depths. Myths and symbols older than history rise like waves. Dreams pull you into its currents. You think you are an individual, but beneath the waterline, you are part of an ocean you cannot control. The danger here is not that the collective unconscious exists, but that you can drown in it. When you are swept away by archetypal forces, you lose yourself. You may begin to see yourself as the savior, the chosen one, the prophet. You may be possessed by myths of betrayal, sacrifice, apocalypse. Jung warned that those who identify too strongly with archetypes risk losing their individuality entirely. They are no longer themselves, but masks worn by forces older than memory. Consider the times you have dreamed with a clarity that felt cosmic, as if the dream were not yours alone, but a message carried across centuries. Consider the way certain stories, symbols, or images grip you with a power you cannot explain. That is the ocean calling. It is beautiful, but it is also dangerous. To mistake the collective for the personal is to lose your footing. History is filled with examples. Leaders who believed they were gods, movements consumed by archetypal rage, entire cultures swept into myths of conquest or purification. These are drownings in the collective unconscious, and the wreckage litters history. But the danger is not only collective madness, it is also personal. If you sink too deeply into these waters, you may lose the fragile boundary between you and the world. You may dissolve into archetypes, losing the thread of your individuality. This is why Jung urged caution. The ocean is not to be denied, but to be navigated. It is a source of meaning, but also of madness. And here is the most unsettling truth. You are not immune. Every time you are swept away by a narrative bigger than yourself, every time you feel pulled into symbols you cannot explain, every time you are caught in currents that seem more myth than life, you are in the ocean. And the question becomes, will you swim or will you drown? Pause and reflect. Because if you feel the pull of this truth, if you recognize how easily you are swept by tides larger than you, then you know you cannot afford to drift asleep. Subscribe now, not as a habit, but as a signal to yourself that you choose awareness over unconscious surrender. Anchor yourself to reminders that you are not just part of the collective storm. You are an individual who must learn to navigate it. And yet, the journey is not finished. For beyond the labyrinth of complexes and the ocean of the collective unconscious lies even more dangerous ground. Jung warned of the peak of inflation, where power blinds and corrupts. He warned of the mirror of anima and animus, where love and illusion entangle until you can no longer tell truth from fantasy. These are the heights and mirrors where many lose themselves entirely. You have wandered the labyrinth. You have tasted the ocean. In the next part, we will climb to the peak where power corrupts and enter the mirror where the soul is divided. And there, the dangers become sharper still. There is a danger more seductive than the shadow, more intoxicating than the persona, more gripping than the labyrinth, and more vast than the ocean. It is the danger of power. The moment you believe you have transcended others, the moment you identify not just with yourself, but with something archetypal, something divine, something larger than life, you begin to climb a peak that rises above the clouds. Jung called this inflation, the identification of the ego with the archetype. It feels glorious, but it is the beginning of destruction. Picture yourself standing on this peak. The air is thin, the sky vast, the view overwhelming. You feel you are no longer ordinary, no longer bound by human frailty. You are chosen, you are destined, you are savior or prophet or hero. At first, this belief fills you with energy. You speak with confidence. You move with certainty. Others are drawn to your conviction. But slowly, without noticing, you are no longer yourself. You are consumed by the archetype. The ego, fragile and finite, cannot carry such weight without breaking. Jung saw this danger everywhere, in leaders who believed they were gods, in prophets who mistook their inner voices for divine commands, in ordinary people who fused with archetypes of power or martyrdom. Inflation is subtle at first, but catastrophic in the end. The inflated ego believes it cannot be wrong. It resists criticism. It isolates itself from correction, and eventually it collapses under the weight of its own illusions. The higher you climb the peak of inflation, the steeper the fall when reality strikes. You may think this is rare, reserved for the megalomaniac or tyrant, but look closer. Have you never felt the intoxicating pull of being the one who knows more, who sees deeper, who stands above? Have you never enjoyed the secret fantasy of being savior to someone, of being indispensable, of being more awakened than the blind crowd? This too is inflation. And though it feels empowering, it is poison. Because in mistaking archetypal energy for personal identity, you lose the ground of your true self. The danger of inflation is that it seduces the very people who believe they are immune. The more you believe you cannot fall, the closer you are to falling. Jung urged humility not as a moral nicety, but as a psychological necessity. Without it, archetypes consume you. And when they do, the mind fractures. History is littered with ruins of those who climbed this peak and never returned. Yet there is another mirror of danger, one that does not rise to the sky but stares directly into your soul. This is the mirror of anima and animus, the inner opposite that shapes your deepest relationships and distorts your understanding of love, desire, and connection. For a man, the anima is the inner feminine. For a woman, the animus is the inner masculine. Jung believed that when you repress or project these forces, they become traps of illusion, pulling you into loves that are not truly yours, into obsessions that feel transcendent but are built on fantasy. Have you ever fallen in love with someone who felt fated, otherworldly, like a missing piece of your soul, and yet later, when the illusion shattered, you wondered how you could have been so blind? That was projection of the anima or animus. You were not seeing the person in front of you. You were seeing your own inner opposite cast like a film onto their face. You mistook your unconscious for reality, and in doing so, you lost yourself. The danger here is profound. Entire lives are destroyed chasing phantoms. People abandon marriages for illusions, pursue relationships that drain them, cling to partners not for who they are, but for what they symbolize in the unconscious. And when the projection collapses, as it always does, the disappointment feels catastrophic, because you are not just losing a person, you are losing a piece of your own soul you thought you had found outside yourself. But repression of the anima or animus is equally dangerous. If you deny it, you become rigid, incomplete, cut off from your full humanity. The man who denies his anima becomes hardened, unable to feel, unable to connect, trapped in a shell of false strength. The woman who denies her animus becomes cut off from her authority, her clarity, her ability to stand firm in her own mind. Repression breeds imbalance, and imbalance breeds collapse. Jung insisted that the task is not to repress or project, but to integrate, to recognize the anima or animus within, to honor it without becoming possessed by it. Only then can love be real. Only then can connection be authentic. Otherwise, the mirror distorts everything. You love illusions, not people. You fight shadows, not reality. You remain trapped in fantasies that consume years of your life. Perhaps you feel the sting of recognition here. Perhaps you have known the ecstasy of projection and the devastation of its collapse. Perhaps you have felt the rigidity of repression, the imbalance it creates. If so, do not despair. Recognition is the first step toward integration, but do not underestimate the danger. For many, the mirror of anima and animus is where they remain stuck forever, chasing phantoms, fearing themselves, unable to find wholeness. And this is why Jung called these places dangerous, because they do not merely wound you, they trap you. They keep you circling the same illusions until life passes you by. Inflation consumes with the fire of false divinity. The mirror ensnares with the seduction of false love. Both can destroy your mind if you mistake them for truth. But there is still one place left to confront, the most dangerous of all. Beyond shadow and mask, beyond labyrinth and ocean, beyond peak and mirror, lies the abyss of wholeness itself. The self, the totality of the psyche, the union of opposites. To face it is to face everything. To survive it is to become whole, but many do not survive. In the next part, we will descend into this final abyss, where the danger is not only madness, but transformation. You have stood at the peak, you have gazed into the mirror, now you are ready to enter the abyss. There is a place deeper than the shadow, more suffocating than the persona, more entrapping than the labyrinth, more engulfing than the ocean, more corrupting than the peak, more deceptive than the mirror. It is the abyss of the self. The place where all opposites converge, light and dark, masculine and feminine, order and chaos, conscious and unconscious. It is not simply a part of you. It is the totality of you. Jung called it the self, the center and circumference of the psyche, the archetype of wholeness. To meet it is both the greatest privilege and the greatest danger. Why danger? Because the ego, fragile and limited, is not built to carry the full weight of the self. The ego wants control. It wants clarity, certainty, order. But the self is paradox. It is both shadow and light, both destroyer and creator, both wound and healer. When the ego encounters the abyss of the self, it trembles, it resists, it clings to what is familiar. And if it refuses to surrender, it shatters. This is why Jung warned that individuation, the process of becoming whole, is not a comfortable path. It is a confrontation with forces larger than you, forces that can break you if you are not prepared. Think of the times you have glimpsed this abyss, moments of overwhelming synchronicity, when life seemed to move with uncanny meaning. Moments when dreams revealed truths you could not deny. Moments when despair and ecstasy collided, leaving you shaken, but somehow more awake. These are doorways into the self. They are intoxicating, but they can also be destabilizing. Too much too soon, and the ego collapses. Mystics call it enlightenment. Psychiatrists may call it psychosis. Jung saw both in the same phenomenon, the confrontation with wholeness. The danger here is subtle but absolute. To be swallowed by the self is to lose individuality. You dissolve into archetypes, into universal patterns, into energies so vast they no longer feel personal. Some call it union with the divine, but without grounding, it becomes madness. Many who sought transcendence found only fragmentation. The abyss of the self is both heaven and hell, and the line between them is razor thin. But Jung insisted it is also necessary. For without the self, there is no wholeness. Without individuation, life remains shallow, half-lived, dominated by shadow, mask, labyrinth, ocean, peak, and mirror. Only in the abyss of the self can integration occur. Only here can you unite the fragments of your being into something rare and unshakable. To survive this abyss is to awaken, not to perfection, but to authenticity. And this is the paradox. The very place that can destroy you is also the place that can set you free. When you surrender to the self, when you allow shadow and light to coexist, when you stop clinging to masks and illusions, you become whole. And wholeness is power. Not the inflated power of the ego, but the quiet authority of someone who is no longer divided. You become unshakable. You become free. But how do you approach such a dangerous place without collapsing? Jung offered guidance. First, you must ground yourself in the ordinary. Do not flee from daily life. Wash the dishes. Walk in nature. Write your thoughts. These simple acts keep you tethered when the abyss pulls at you. Second, you must face your shadow honestly. Integration begins not with grand visions, but with the humility to admit your flaws. Write them, own them, embrace them. Third, you must practice boundaries. Say no when you mean no. Claim space for your own energy. Without boundaries, the self cannot emerge, because you remain enslaved to others. And finally, you must embrace silence, not as escape, but as presence. Silence allows you to hear the self whisper beneath the noise. These practices are not glamorous, but they are essential. They turn the overwhelming abyss into a path. They transform danger into initiation. They prepare you to face the wholeness of your being without breaking. And as you hear these words, ask yourself, are you ready to face the abyss? Are you willing to let go of illusions, masks, and projections? Are you willing to claim both your darkness and your light? If so, then you are already on the path of individuation. It is not easy, it is not safe, but it is the only way to become whole. And when you do, something extraordinary happens. You no longer fear the shadow because you know it is yours. You no longer suffocate behind the persona because you live authentically. You no longer wander the labyrinth endlessly because you understand its patterns. You no longer drown in the ocean because you can swim its tides. You no longer collapse on the peak because humility grounds you. You no longer chase illusions in the mirror because you recognize them as projections. You no longer fear the abyss because you have become whole. This is the rarest transformation, to live without illusion, without collapse, without self-betrayal. To walk as someone who has faced the most dangerous places of the mind and returned, not broken but reborn. You become rare, you become unforgettable, you become respected, not because you demand it, but because your very presence radiates authenticity. And so I ask you now, are you ready to choose this path? Are you ready to stop hiding, stop performing, stop running? Write it in the comments. I choose awareness. Let it be your declaration, your vow. Share your journey, your struggles, your truths, so others walking this path know they are not alone. And if you are ready to keep going deeper, to keep exploring the wisdom of Jung and the hidden maps of psychology, subscribe now, because this is not the end. It is only the beginning of a journey into wholeness, into freedom, into the rarest form of power, the power of being truly yourself. You have walked through shadow and mask, labyrinth and ocean, peak and mirror. You have faced the abyss, and now you are whole.